All over the world, climate change is challenging the way we live, move, produce, and consume electricity. But islands will be particularly impacted. These remote locations, isolated from the rich resources of the mainland, tend to depend on fossil fuel on-site generation or costly submarine cables to address their energy needs. But to thrive in a post-climate change world, they will need strong, self-reliant grids running on green energy.
These challenges are part of the scope of the larger project TransformAr, an EU-funded initiative for transformational adaptation to climate change. In the case of islands, TransformAr has identified green power production and energy independence as major levers on the pathway to climate resilience.
Different renewable energy packages can be imagined depending on the geographical position of each island. In the Caribbean, a warm and sunny region prone to hurricane, solar, wind, and geothermal energy are the most promising technologies. These islands are among the most vulnerable to climate change, and some of them have already set roadmaps to reach 100% of renewable energy, which is supported by storage systems like hydrogen. Southeast Asian and Pacific islands have been among the most vocal in pushing for tighter climate regulations. They suffer from very loose links to the mainland and need an especially solid green generation capacity. Hydropower, solar, and wind energy are especially promising. Mediterranean enjoys higher penetration of renewables and stronger interconnections to the mainland, but wind and solar in particular have some yet unrealized potential. As part of EU countries, these islands have especially strong climate targets and green energy legislation. In the future, other island groups can be identified and studied more closely, such as Norwegian, Japanese, African islands, islands in the Atlantic, and others.
To illustrate our project's potential, a case study has been done on Guadeloupe, a large French island in the Caribbean. Guadeloupe is one of the 6 demonstrators of the TransformAr project, with a particular focus on agriculture, water use, and energy. Its final energy consumption averages 6,500 gigawatt hours over the past decade and shows an upward trend. 2/3 of that amount come from the transportation sector through fuel. Transportation in Guadeloupe encompasses road vehicles, which overwhelmingly take the form of thermal individual cars, an extensive maritime network inside and outside the archipelago, and an international airport that also services regional traffic in the Indies. Guadeloupe dedicates around 200 gigawatt hours to heating.
Electricity, on the other hand, represents a quarter of its final energy consumption at around 1,700 gigawatt hours each year, 65% of which is supplied through fossil fuels today. The renewable potential is only partially realized, but by 2033 the territory plans to triple its solar capacity, almost quadruple its wind capacity, and quintuple its geothermal capacity. Furthermore, current diesel plants will be converted to biomass, allowing for a near 100% renewable on-site generation. To balance variable wind and solar power, the island will also require roughly 150 megawatt hours of flexible storage by 2033.
These numbers from the local administration and electricity provider reflect the current strengths and ambitions of the territory. To expand on this, a TransformAr task force was dedicated to identifying the total renewable potential on the archipelago and setting up 4 different storylines for accommodating future energy needs. Free Global Limit, Independence 2040, Independence 2050, and Independence 2050 with a 30% renewable capacity limit. Each scenario considers electricity, heat, and mobility demand separately. Segmentation of the island and collection of the relevant demand data was done in coordination with local authorities.
Business as usual is the base scenario, where no measures are taken to tackle climate change. The lack of an emissions cap led the model to promote inexpensive coal as a replacement to oil instead of renewable energy sources. Overall primary energy consumption still decreases due to the improved efficiency of renewables over oil power plants and the high electrification of the vehicle fleet. However, the island stays very dependent on fossil fuels throughout, from 98% in 2018 to 75% in 2050, with a reliance on coal for electricity generation and on oil for the remaining combustion-based vehicle fleet. The shift towards more efficient technologies in this scenario does result in an overall decrease in emissions, however. The increasing penetration of coal in the energy mix stagnates this trend towards 2050 onwards. On average, total emissions of Guadeloupe decreased from 1.9 to 1.4 megatons of CO2 in this period, slowly transitioning from being transport-dominated to power-dominated due to high electrification, going from a 60-40 respective split in 2018 to 40-60 in 2050. Coal gradually becomes the largest emitter on the Archipelago in 2040, while emissions from oil are gradually reduced from 1.7 megatons in 2018 to 0.5 megatons from 2040 onwards. Independence 2040 is a more optimistic scenario, with an emphasis on a swift transition to renewable energy sources and maximum self-sufficiency of Guadeloupe in the shortest time possible. Overall, primary energy consumption decreases by a third from 2018 to 2050. This could be attributed to efficiency improvements, major shifts in transport, and a gradual transition from oil and coal to a varied mix of wind, solar, biomass, and other renewables. The scenario is also noteworthy for the swift implementation of numerous conventional technologies non-existent on the archipelago at the present, such as hydrogen-fueled airplanes, ships running on biofuels, and mass usage of heat pumps in buildings. These advancements facilitate the complete energy independence of Guadeloupe by 2040. As a result, emissions sharply decline from 2018 onwards, and the archipelago reaches a net zero value by 2040. This change from 1.29 megatons to zero is primarily due to the discarding of oil and coal for transport and power production and substituting them for locally available renewable energy sources. Independence 2050 is a still ambitious but less demanding scenario intended to showcase a gradual transition towards the adoption of more renewable energy technologies in Guadeloupe. While less swiftly than the previous scenario, the archipelago still reaches energy independence by 2050 and achieves a comparable primary energy reduction from 29 to 19 petajoules. One of the key differences is a significant presence of fossil fuels in the energy mix all the way to 2045, especially in the transport sector. Technological advancement, the increase of overall efficiency, and the shift towards renewables such as wind and solar are still observable in this scenario as well. The gradual transition over time results in decreased emissions, and the archipelago is able to achieve a complete net zero value in 2050. However, within ships and aviation, some amount of emissions persist up until 2050. At the current moment, we are computing the other remaining pathways and will present our results shortly.
Following that, an assessment study of the impact of energy needs on the Guadeloupean water sector will be conducted, circling back to the core of this TransformAr demonstrator.